All right, welcome to Clotheslines and Headlines. A real vibrant show we got here going on, but we got Steve Bennett and Keith Langston. What's up, boys? We're here to
Yeah.
memorialize
Hello.
and share fun stories on the Iron Sheik. Let's just kind of jump into what the Sheik was before we get going. All right, in his native country, he was a standout wrestler. After moving to the U.S., he won a AAU wrestling championship at 180 pounds in 1971. Soon after, he transitioned to pro wrestling. He was Vern Gagne, Vern's native-based AWA.
His first class. Yep.
He would make his WWF debut in 1979 under Hussein Arab. In 1983, he would finally land the Iron Sheik persona. As the Iron Sheik, he would become an extremely popular wrestler, winning the WWF title in December 1983 and winning the WWF World Tag Team titles with Nikolai Volkov at WrestleMania 1 in 1985. His biggest rivals were Sergeant Slaughter, Bob Backlund, and Hulk Hogan. He would go on to be inducted to the WWE Hall of Fame in the class of 2005 and had a legendary Hall of Fame acceptance speech. In later generations would note him as a pop culture icon from the Stern shows in his legendary Twitter feed. When I say the Iron Sheik, Steve Bennett, what do you first comes to your mind?
He's a revolutionary. I mean, he's someone who changed the business, made it what it is today. He went from his home. I was talking to Paula about this. I picked my daughter up from school today, and I told her the news. And I said, think about the life he lived. He was born in Iran. He was the protector of the Shah of Iran, who then killed the most famous wrestler in their country. And Sheik said, well, if he'll kill him, he'll kill me. And had fled his land, fled his country, and came to the only place in the United States where he knew of someone in Minnesota, and goes on to be someone who headlines wrestling events in Madison Square Garden. It's just an unthinkable life, really. And not only did he live it and participate in the business for as long as he did, he changed it. I mean, he's when I think of my whole lifetime, who were people on the heel side that really changed what it meant to be a heel, revolutionized the business, made an impact that will live on for generations after him. He's one of the first 2 or 3 names I would think of. It's like Roddy Piper and Sheik are like the first 2 that come to mind of people who, changed the business because of what they did on the heel side. He ended one of the most historic championship runs in history at Madison Square Garden, beating Bob Backlund. He started the most historic championship run in history. Hulk Hogan in 1984, which doesn't end until 1988. He kick-started that run. And then he reinvented himself when he could no longer work in the ring and became, a pop culture icon. Sometimes maybe it was a little sad. Maybe sometimes you felt like people are laughing at him instead of with him. He kind of straddled that fence a little bit. But, as someone who's a huge Stern fan, has listened to Howard Stern literally every day since 1994 or 5, even though I don't listen to current shows, but still every day I listen to Stern, and Sheik's appearances will come up, and I laugh my ass off. So, I mean, I think the number one thing is just like, what a life. Like, what an unbelievable life. And, just to come forward from where he did and accomplish what he did, as a second language speaker, someone who never spoke the language all that great, and to use that for him, really, and to change the business he worked in. Man, hats off to the Sheik. What a legend. A thrown around word that actually applies here.
Yes, the definition. Keithy, what about you, buddy?
I mean, Steve said it, almost all of it. I mean, he really did. I mean, he changed a lot of, well, he was really awesome in the business. I mean, he was one of those, he could have easily been just a typical foreign heel kind of thing, but I think he transcended and really kind of expanded upon that foreign heel character and brought it to, as you said, like a pop culture icon. I mean, let's not forget, he was in the Rock and Wrestling cartoon, He was a guy who
is LJN. One of the
Yeah,
most
his
famous
LJN.
LJNs.
I had his LJN figure. It was
Right on.
awesome. I mean, the one of the most iconic pieces of footwear is the boot with the hook on it. I mean,
Yeah.
that was Sheik's thing. I mean, I don't think we can talk about before the boom really in '84 with Hulkamania, but he had that boot match with Slaughter, and they had those boot matches, and I mean those were just the thing with the Sheik was that he really was just unbelievable as far as an in-ring competitor when he was in his prime, and I mean, I also love the whether or not they're true stories or not, but the stories of, him breaking Hogan's leg, Vern wanting him to break Hogan's leg when
Yeah.
Hogan was going to go back to the WWF. And when, they asked Vince if he wanted to break Warrior's legs at SummerSlam 91. I mean, it always seemed like if there was going to be, if you had somebody that needed to have their legs broken, it was going to be Sheiky Baby that was going to do it. Of course, you go into, his persona changed into Colonel Mustafa, which kind of brought him into a new audience in 91. And a lot of people I know his modified bushwhacker, walk that he would do down the ring.
He
I
owned it
think
though.
he did. And that was kind of a cool change and transition. I mean, looking back at it, it's funny that he was an Iranian, he was an Iranian citizen playing an Iraqi character. It's kind of odd, and if you look back in the real history of those two countries, they didn't always get along. So I think it's funny that he kind of did that, but he fit a role and he kept that role up. I mean, he went with it, he rolled with it, and it continued on not very long after the Triangle of Terror broke up, but he hung in there for a little while, at least through Survivor Series. And
He was in the Rumble 92, right?
yeah, right. And I think in the Rumble 92, if I remember correctly, they refer to him as a former world champion. So I mean, they even when he was Colonel Mustafa, they still referenced the fact that he was a former world champion and that he was like the Iron Sheik.
And he got some Turner money too, right? He got some of that Turner money after that, didn't he?
Well, he did, because he went to WCW, and after he left the first time in the WWF, and he was really out of shape, I think, and he looked terrible when he was in. I think he's in like one of the Great American Bashes, like in maybe 90, and he's the Iron Sheik, so I mean, he went in there as that, but he did get some Turner money. I think that I kind of agree with Steve where, once he became like that pulp culture icon, it seemed like a lot of like the shoot interviews were taking advantage of him because they knew that he was just maybe didn't have all his faculties anymore. And it's a shame, but I also kind of stick with the old, adage that they're keeping kayfabe, so it's like, you don't know if he knew
what he
what
was doing a little bit.
yeah, if he knew what was going on and he just went, this is going to make me more money and keep me going strong. Obviously, when he shows up at WrestleMania 17, he wins the Rumble, he wins the Battle Royal because he can't go over the top rope, and I just think that's so awesome. It's perfect,
It's great.
But I mean, it's kind of cool that in that kind of a moment, I mean, a lot of people consider that to be the greatest WrestleMania, and he had his like last moment in the sun in one of the greatest WrestleManias, and that's kind of cool. He wasn't just a footnote in that. He's on the card. He won, and it's kind of cool. So I think it's funny, Steve, you said you don't listen to Stern anymore. I was going to say, you still listen to Stern every day?
I listen every day, but not
I listened to Stern every day since I did up until like Artie left and Eric the Midget passed away, and then I was like, I can't listen anymore.
Eric the Midget dying is a great turning point for me.
It is a turning point.
The birthday party that they did in New York City, that's kind of like the very end.
That's the end of it. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. But I remember when he came in and they were, they goofed on him and had like the phone calls where
Artie was
Macho Man Randy Savage was calling him, I'm going to get you, Iron Sheik. I'm going to get you. And he's like, you fucking piece of shit. Yeah. So, I mean,
suck my 10-inch dick.
I mean,
there was a great moment on Stern where Hogan was the guest.
Yeah.
And she called in. And
he did not like Hogan. That's
and he was taking some shots at Hogan. And Hogan was taking some shots back.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end, they were like, love you, buddy. Love you, buddy.
Yeah.
So even
I love too that he would walk around with the big gold belt. And it was like, you never won that. Like, that's not your title. Like, it would have been better if you
or something, It's just a prop he had.
Yeah, they should, but somebody should have given him at least the winged eagle belt. I mean,
Yeah, the green
kind of
one.
won. He
The
won at
green
least
one that he
that
won.
championship.
Yeah.
The green
But-
strap belt. Or something.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was huge. I mean, we had seen transitional champions throughout the first, couple decades with the WWF, and transitional champions, while they were they were short, like Stan State or Stan Stasiak, yeah. And Ivan Koloff, they were very short.
Even
I felt like,
Superstar in a way,
yeah, I mean, I felt like he kind of matched Superstar's kind of charisma, and the fact that he probably could have ran with that title a little bit longer. I mean, yeah, I think giving it to Hogan was obviously the biggest moment in wrestling history, but he could have probably gone a little while, a couple more shows at Madison Square Garden before he gave it up, because he was that kind of charismatic guy.
And I'll put a modern twist on it too. No matter who defeats Roman Reigns and ends this reign, no matter what happens with their reign, it's still going to be an enormous part
Absolutely.
of wrestling history.
Absolutely.
That they were the one after the 1,000 days, whatever it is.
Yep.
You guys could tell me better. That finally ended it. Whoever that guy is, that's going to matter. And it mattered when they picked Stasiak. It mattered when they picked Koloff.
Right.
It mattered when they picked Sheik. No matter what happened in those reigns, even though that they were transitional, as you'd say, and even if the person who beats Reigns only has it for one pay-per-view and gives it to someone else, whatever, that still matters. That moment is still iconic and historic.
Absolutely.
And that's funny that throwing in the towel.
Well, and that's funny that all these years later, we still remember Stasiak, Koloff, Sheik. I mean, I would say Graham, but Graham really wasn't. He wasn't a transitional champion. He was. I think they were trying something, or maybe he was supposed to be a transitional, and they realized that he was way hotter than.
I believe. Rest in peace. He died like a month or so ago. But
yeah,
I think Vince Senior stayed to his word. He told him the date he was getting it. And he told him the date he was losing it, and he gained all that steam. And it crushed him when he took it away, because the plan's the plan, buddy. But we got back.
I did want to say too, historically speaking, I have about to be 7-year-old daughter, and she watches a lot of 80s wrestling with me, and I'll show her things, and I'm always curious to see how it hits her. You know what I mean? Same with music too. Like I'll play her Van Halen, and I'm so curious to see will this in any way resonate with her? Because deep down, she likes to listen to songs from Disney movies, but she'll also rock with me. And deep down, she really wants to watch, Luca on Disney Plus, but she'll spend 2 hours and watch wrestling with me. She can do both, And when we do, I like to see what resonates with her. And Sheiky's in the top 5.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Especially when you talk about, if we just talked about heels, he might be 1 and 1. She was crushed today. I seen the white drop out of her face when I told her, in the car, and then I said, well, he was in his 80s, and, it's a more age appropriate death than some of his contemporaries had. And that made sense to her. But I just am always really curious to see how things, matter to her. And he was very impactful. He understood the nuance of creating the Sheik character too, right? Instead of just having boots, he had the curl that he would load to be a heel, right?
Yep.
Instead of just a mustache, he had a mustache he would twirl. He picked up on these little nuances that enhanced the character, and he had a flair for the dramatic. Another, we haven't mentioned it yet, but kind of, I think Ryan, you did, but first ever championship change at a WrestleMania.
Yep.
Sheik's right there.
A lot of record book, a lot of peaks for the Iron Sheik.
Also
he had his moments, and even his worst moments are historic, right? His first run with the company ends because he gets busted on the New Jersey Turnpike with, right? Even that is historic. Somehow everything he did, it found a way to.
It was the first time that kayfabe was really broken when people found out that these two guys that were fighting with each other every night around the country were driving together.
Versus Iran.
There's the great stories about his. They went to him and said, Sheik, we did a drug test and you were positive. And that's right, Bubba. And he didn't realize that was. bad. So I don't know. I
mean,
think
I feel like he made Nikolai Volkov. That's the most entertaining and
Oh.
interesting Nikolai Volkov
Absolutely.
ever
I
was.
was going to bring that up too.
Volkov certainly
Absolutely.
wasn't entertaining or interesting any other point in his career except when he was with Sheik.
That is a very strong point, Keith.
Yeah.
David.
And I feel bad. I mean, I know Nikolai Volkov, rest in peace, but oof, that
Yeah.
guy was just not interesting at all unless he was with the Sheik.
Well, I'll defend him a little bit. Like I think to find the best Volkov, you almost need to go back even a little bit further than that. You know what I
Sure.
mean? Like I think his best, he kind of aged out a little bit, but again, Sheik found a way to make
Squeeze
him
whatever he could get out of him.
and captivating, and everyone he was around was better because he was around.
Yeah, no, he was an awesome
fans.
guy. He was really good. His character was great, and I mean, it's like you said, it's a shame that he's gone. It is a little bit more age appropriate now.
Yes.
I mean, but I mean, at the very least, I think that he can, if there's an afterlife and he's there and he's looking down, he can see that everybody today and probably for the next few days is going to mourn the loss of, one of the greats. And I think he's rightfully takes his place in history. I mean, he's probably, if I'm going to do like I hate to say like do a Mount Rushmore, because I know that's a thing that everybody does. But I mean, if you're going to do a Mount Rushmore of foreign heels, he's probably in the Washington.
The first guy on it. Yeah.
S tier.
Yeah. So
he also lost a daughter. He had a daughter who was murdered.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about that today. If there is an afterlife, hopefully they're together. Me and Paul were talking about
crazy. That's crazy.
And I did see that he has a granddaughter named Marissa, which was obviously named after his daughter, which my daughter's named Paula after my grandmother. I know how cathartic that could be for a family. So that made me smile today to know that there's a new Marissa for them to love. So I hope she's doing well. But, we talk about the highs and lows, and even in his personal life, they existed. He was married for 47 years, wasn't necessarily in the house all 47 years.
Yeah.
He had to bounce him on his ass a few times, I think. But, she always stood by him and supported him. One of the great political controversies of all time in Ontario, when the mayor up there was caught smoking crack, he finds himself in the middle of that on the steps of his office, asking questions, which is kind of a stroke of genius in his later years. But I mean, we could probably, if we did this for an hour, we'd still think stuff would come up. We'd think of stuff.
I would challenge anybody out there listening to go and look at some of Mean Gene's bloopers, because there's the blooper he has with the Sheik, I think, where they're talking about like it's at the turkeys, or I think and it's one of the better bloopers, because Mean Gene was actually his best man at his wedding, and he was friends with Mean Gene, and so it's just funny, like they had. Those bloopers of Gene are great. So, I mean, I challenge anybody out there to go look at them. So.
Oh, what do you want to say about the Sheiky baby? He passed away today. We're doing a tribute to him. What would you say about Sheiky? Don't get nervous. Tell him about it. The matches you like. Do you like to play this LJN?
Yeah.
Yeah. And what do you think? Is he one of the best heels? What did he say when he would get the microphone? What would he say?
America.
Pooey.
Pooey.
Yeah. And what was number one?
I forgot the country.
You forgot his country, Iran, right?
Yeah.
But she just came from dance. I thought maybe she'd be a little bit more into talking. I guess she's nervous.
Well, Paula, good thing you look more like your mother.
That is a blessing. That is a blessing. They say so. Tell them who the greatest soccer playing nation in the world is. Tell them.
Italy.
That's right. All right. Go eat or something. All right. Love you.
Go eat.
Paul, that's subjective. That's subjective. But in the soccer game, out of a fight. But as we wind down here, guys, what I think the Iron Sheik, I think his biggest attribute is charisma.
Mm-hmm.
Do either one of you want to share, one lasting moment? When you think of Iron Sheik, what do you think of? Best match, I would probably say the boot camp match with Slaughter.
Mm-hmm.
Vicious, definitely the most vicious.
Yes,
they did not hold back. I mean, those guys.
Slaughter's so good. He's underrated, but that's
they're awesome. They did that's awesome.
The biggest moment is either winning from Backling or probably losing to Hogan. So that transition of 6 weeks or so, Steve, or whatever it was.
Yeah, that's the peak of his career. And I don't know if it's because I'm a trivia guy or if I'm a history guy like this, but I just think that the first title change at WrestleMania is such a huge thing too.
That's really cool.
You know, and he's the guy swinging the cane. You know, he's the guy cracking the back there.
Mhm.
You know, and boy, that was a crack too. He went for it. He broke that thing in 20. What cane? But like, I don't know, a defining moment to me is just that I think it's got to be him winning the belt because of the context, right? It's this guy who had to flee his home the same way my grandmother and grandfathers had to flee their home from the Nazis and Mussolini and all that in the 40s in Italy, everything that was going wrong there. You know, they left for me to have a better life. And Sheik did the same thing. He left his country. He started a family here. He's the American dream. And I think him standing in the ring at a sold-out Madison Square Garden, having ended one of the longest, most infamous, important title reigns in the history of the company and holding the belt, you know, what that symbolizes is being the top of the business, certainly in New York. Doesn't get much bigger than that. You know what I mean? So.
Yep. And then, Keith, before we get out of here, I want to mention before I forget, about sometime last year, Tyler Kelly and I did a GWE podcast where Tyler had the Iron Sheik and pitted him against me representing JBL. So that was an ace memorial of the Iron Sheik. We would go back and forth in kind of character against each other or whatever the categories we would go by. I'm going to put that description in the YouTube comments if you want to reach out.
No chance.
All right, Sheiky baby.
5 years ago, I don't even remember JBL was a wrestler. Give me a break.
Sheiky
Not
baby.
even close.
I'll give you a clothesline to hell there, buddy.
Not even close. And I actually like JBL, but come on.
JBL's a little underrated, but that's for another day. All right, Keith, you got anything before we get out of here, pal?
I mean, I think, again, if I'm gonna, the things that remind me so much is obviously like his LJN figure, the curved boots, his obviously what he was capable of doing in the ring, the stories that you heard of like him in his prime, you know, like I love the stories of him breaking Hogan's legs and then breaking Warrior's legs and just people saying that was a thing he was willing to do, and which just shows me loyalty. Like he was willing to do that for Vern. You know, he was going to break Hogan's legs, and if you want,
also offered him some scratch.
Yeah, but I mean, I like though that the loyalty factor was there, and honestly, like
it was his loyalty to his current boss that made him decide against it, right?
Sure, absolutely, yeah. So I think that it was, you know, I think the guy was just he was a one of a kind, and it's great to think of, you know, fondly of him, and I think he leaves a lot of good memories that we can hang on to for many years to come. So, R.I.P. Sheiky baby. Sheiky baby.
Man.
Yes.
Rest in peace, my man. All right. Look at this beautiful red one right there.
Is it right?
All right, Steve, you want to plug anything before we get out of here?
Nah, it's just about Sheik today. God bless you, Sheiky. Let's plug his movie. He's got 2 great documentaries out there now because A&E just did one, right? But I think the original one that the brothers did, I think it's called Sheik or The Sheik or something like that. You can find it easily.
His face is on the cover of it.
I think it's free on YouTube actually too now.
Yeah.
Let's plug that because it's a great watch, and I think there's more detail into the ups and downs of Sheik's personal life and things like that. So that's a great plug for today. Learn more about one of the all-time greats.
Cool. All right, guys, we'll catch you on the next one. Thank you.
All right, thank you.